So first and foremost, thank you and welcome to everyone for attending today. My name is Jessica. I'm the Curator of Collections here at the museum. Can everyone hear me okay, hopefully? So this is our third program in a series of programs about the Then and Now book. And I just have a couple quick announcements before we start, and then I'll turn things over to our presenters. So with virtual programs, sometimes there can be some technical difficulties. So if that occurs at any point, please just kind of bear with us and we'll try to figure it out as quickly as possible. The museum gallery is currently still closed to the public due to the pandemic, but we're regularly evaluating the situation and following guidance. So we will update you as soon as there are any changes to that. During this time, we're also looking for new ways to stay engaged with you guys virtually. So we really appreciate you guys being here today. We've had two programs in this series before our current one here, and then we also have some select oral histories that can be found via the museum's website. So make sure to check out the website and our Facebook page for new offerings as they come up as well. During the program, I'll be keeping an eye on the Q&A box. So if you have any questions for our panelists, type them in there and we'll try to answer those as they come up and as time allows. So with that, I will introduce our authors and photographers who are responsible for this wonderful book. Estes Park Historian Laureate Dr. James Pickering, photographer Mcgregor, and then Museum Director Derek Fortini. So with that, I'll turn it over to Derek.
All right, thanks, Jess. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Like Jessica said, please type in questions for us as we're presenting. I think Mick and Jim and I, we all kind of feel like we like the more of the conversational approach to these. We don't like so much the idea of just presenting and talking the entire time. So feel free to ask questions throughout it, and then Jess will kind of jump in there and let us know if we can go ahead and answer some of those. This specific program here, we titled the Author's Choice of Sites. I thought it was going to be the easiest one. It turned out to be probably more difficult because I think we all wanted to put every site in there because every photo that we did has a backstory on how we captured the story or how we captured the now photograph. The history of the then one, all of that fun stuff. So it ended up being quite difficult, but we wanted to go with it because we did a poll at the last program and participants said that they were most interested in just seeing what were kind of our favorite sites. We have a lot of them, which is why we scheduled this for an hour and a half. We kind of planned on it. So we'll try to just scoot through them pretty quick here, and but not too quick, right guys?
That's fine.
And so I'll just dive in with the PowerPoint unless there's anything that you two would like to add. We'll give a little intro for the book itself once I start the PowerPoint. But did you two want to add anything?
Well, I put a footnote on what you said. I thought it was very interesting when the three of us came up with our favorites. And you're right. They all, I think in most cases, they have backstories as well as the history of the site itself. So backstories in the sense of taking the photographs, that kind of thing. I'm going to get off for a second because my phone is ready.
Go for it. So just about the book itself a little bit here. This is a reprint. Okay, it's a revised edition. So here's the original that probably many people remember from 2006 when it came out. It went quick, that's for sure. It was a great product then and very high demand. And I always joke around. I actually used it to prep for my interview for the job that I ended up getting at the Estes Park Museum. And so it was a great book, that's for sure. The catalyst behind it was the demand for it, and it was out of print. And And Jim and Mick were very interested in doing another version of it and revising it. And then we were looking for a really good fundraiser because we needed a new collection and storage facility. And that's something that we're still working on. We have the museum annex building now, but all the money that come from the new book, which is going to take up more of my screen because it's ginormous, actually goes towards the remodel of the annex building and turning it into the ideal professional collection storage facility that is appropriate for all of the artifacts that the museum has. We have over 35,000 artifacts, and Jim was very supportive of this because he knows how much we rely on those artifacts so that we can go ahead and pin down the history. So all the proceeds of the book go towards that. So here are just some specifics for it. If you don't already have it in hand, or with the Christmas season coming up, you can keep it in mind for a gift for somebody else. So here are some of the specifics of it. You do to get a 10% discount on it if you are a member. And then I got talked into it, and then I talked my family into posing for the mask you also receive down there, that if you become a member of the museum as well. So that's my plug for the book.
Derek, you might want to mention that people can get them with mailing boxes already attached. So all you got to do is take it to the post office and mail it to someone.
Yeah, which is super nice. If you want to mail it to somebody, you can do that. You can, we can get it to you one way or another. And I'll list our shop manager's name at the end of this, Elaine Hunt Downey, and then she can go ahead and take care of all the specifics. We're very flexible on how we go about selling these and providing them for everybody. And so we'll dive right in. Like I said, we had a lot of sites here that we wanted to show. We'll see how far we can get with everything. Jim, being our historian laureate, is going to be nice enough to give us some of the background and context for a lot of the photographs. Mick and I were the main photographers. Mick is more of a professional photographer than I am. He knows more of the technical stuff, so I might even ask him a few questions when we get into it. And then I always saw my role as kind of being the middleman of pushing this project forward and trying to get it done. We did a lot of the photos over, I think it was about 2 summers worth, and that wasn't really planned, but it takes a lot of time to gather a lot of the photos. And once we sat down to really, with our publisher, some of them just didn't meet the standards we thought that they needed to be. Some of them just didn't line up. And so over the winter, we gathered some winter shots. And then the next summer, we finished it up with some of the final shots. We greatly expanded this book too. I can't even remember all the specifics of it, Jim. I always refer to you on that. But we definitely got to the point where in our head, we were just taking photos and finding sites and finding new sites, which were great. And then the publisher finally said, here's the physical dimensions of the book. You might want to stop with the sites. And so we finally did, and ended up with the book that we have. So there are still a few sites that I have loved to have added to it, but we'll see if we can do that another time. So
I got a question. You're going to jump into this one now, the panorama?
Yeah, we're going to start off with the panorama, and then we'll get into, it's not going to be necessarily chronological, but it kind of basically will be for how the book is laid out. But I thought it would be fun to start with the panorama view of downtown, especially because Mick could talk about that. And it's one of those iconic ones too. So I definitely want to start with it.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, this is definitely an iconic one. And if you do own the book, you have the privilege of seeing many of the other panoramas that were taken of Estes Park. And a great majority were taken from the exact same place by various photographers from 1903 on through 1940 and so on. I love panoramas. And so I'm going to take a minute here to kind of expand on something, because I don't know if you've thought about this, but our eyes and our brain are an amazing imaging system. You know, right now, a lot of money is being spent to not only build, but to buy imaging systems, you know, to try to improve on it. And the judge of the quality of all these new systems is our brain and our eye. But I don't know if you remember the first time that you ever went into Estes Park as you drove around that curve there, where right now there's a big, like a monolith. And when you see the breadth and expanse of Estes Park, when you drive around that curve just above what we know as Crocker Ranch, I know that for most of us at least, our breath was taken away. And it's for several reasons. Our eyes are capable of seeing almost side to side. If you don't move your head around, you basically have 170 degrees worth of field vision. The resolution of your eyes, resolution now is a household term. We have the 1080 and the 2K, 4K, now we're going to 8K. And why? Because manufacturers feel that we will appreciate the increase in quality and we'll spend the money for it. But we go way beyond that. We go way beyond that resolution. In fact, our resolution cannot be measured by pixels like cameras and photographs do. They are continuous. The color ranges that we see. I had to laugh the first time that I bought a photo quality printer, and it advertised itself as 1.6 million colors. And I don't know if you've remembered those kind of advertisements, but when I saw that, I thought, well, wait a minute, take away one color. Will I be able to notice the difference? No. The point is our eyes and our brain merge that all together into a total quality framework. And then, of course, there's what we call high resolution, or I'm sorry, the high dynamic range. And that's a popular form of photography right now. I'm starting to play around with it, and it's kind of fun. But cameras and back then film and even the more advanced cameras systems today can only see about 30 to 40% of the colors that we just automatically take into our brain. Panoramas enthrall me because they show me everything. I like seeing everything. Well, almost. Panoramas are only so many inches high, but they go so far across that they give you a bigger idea of breadth, the breadth of what you're looking at. So the photographers, amazingly enough, back in those eras, back from the early 1900s on, also realized this. When the first panoramic photographs were taken, they became a form of competition. Well, enough about panoramas, because I'm trying to sell our next book. And Jim laughs at that. He says this was his last one, and I think we can talk him into another one. But this one that's in the book is from a photographer named Miller. Very little is known about Miller, but he took this, and it was shot right from where the Christmas star is, on top of what we call Little Prospect Mountain. So that's where I went up, of course, to shoot the picture for the first one. And if you can show do you have the next one, Derek? Yeah. Well, this is the last one that we put in. And of course, what is interesting about this is, why we wanted to, on our second edition, why we wanted to update as many photographs as possible is because even between 2004, 2005, and 2006, when our first book came out, and now, when our second book was released, a lot of changes have happened between the 2013 flood, between the fires, and just natural changes and human changes that happen to things. But the biggest difference that you see here, of course, is the Park Theater Mall is gone. A tragic fire that took away a very iconic structure. And right there where Derek is indicating with the cursor. And, what a shame, but again, time marches on. But if you'll go back to the now, as you can see there it was. A lot of differences too in what we call Davis Hill, a little bit to the left up there. That was carved out and made into a parking lot. Very needed parking lot, as you will see when the next picture comes up. And like we've said during our talks, the biggest difference too that you'll see between our nows and thens is the amount of trees that exist. Now, Estes Park escaped a big one. and that was from the Cameron and the troublesome East fire. If we hadn't had that cold weather and so on, who knows what could have happened. And we're thankful that it didn't. But I love this panorama. And if I can, I'm going to go back and shoot the rest of the panoramas that are in the book that Derek put in there, because I think they all deserve a now and then as well. Like I said, this was actually taken from a little bit to the left of the star originally, when you're downtown looking up. And there's about 4 or 5 photographers that shot their panoramas from here as well. Clatworthy shot some from his studio that are on the west side of just above where his studio was at. And, they all did. They all shot them. Very, very nice picture. And I love panoramas.
So Mick, real quick, I wanted to ask you, we have a set of panoramas set up at the museum in our gallery, and they're taken by, they all look like they're exact comparisons, because of where they were taken. So there's obviously that one sweet spot that all the photographers can see from down below. Can you explain to everybody what it was like for you to hike up there to get this? Or are you imagining somebody doing this in 1919, 1908 with their tripods of those times? Just real quick.
Yeah, and Derek sent a gentleman to me that wanted to reshoot this on his own. And I said, well, here it is. And oh, by the way, are you okay doing a class 4 hike? Those of you that are hikers and climbers, you know what a class 4 means. You just don't get up here just like walking from your car to like what you would do walking to the park. So it is a dangerous hike. If you don't know what you're doing, you could end up falling and hurting yourself. The gentleman that I sent up there, I never heard back from him, Derek. I hope he survived this.
Me too.
It is a dangerous hike, so don't try to do it on your own. If you want to know where this was, how to get up there, I'd be glad to tell you. I think it's actually just below private property that I know of. I've never looked at a map to see if it is private property. But that's the other thing that we got to consider too, and we considered heavily when we took pictures for this book, is who owns the property, and do we get permission, or is this a non-selectee, for doing what we were doing?
Guys, if I can interrupt for a minute, we have some questions from the audience.
Definitely.
The first one, they were hoping you could identify the buildings across from Bond Park in the older image.
Oh, sure. Jim, you might have to help me with some of them, but I know this is the schoolhouse here that was built, the 2-story schoolhouse. It was expanded in 1916, I think it was.
Right. That's the one of those two is the parsonage for the Presbyterian Church, which was on Elkhorn Avenue.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was this one.
Yeah, and then the Prospect Inn here at the far side.
Yeah, this far one over here on the left would be the Prospect Inn.
Yep. And I've got a question for you, Derek.
Okay.
I've been working on the early infrastructure of Rocky Mountain National Park. And so we start with the park's first administration building, and it's right down here across from the Big Sam service store.
Yep.
And my question for you is, I've never looked at the back of the building before as close as I did now. Does the building that's at the museum have those 2 small windows and a door in the back?
It actually has one small window, which you can see in this photograph to the left there, and the door itself, and those are still intact.
And you can also see in this photograph that the front of the building has that slight facade above the roof line, like we have in the existing building.
That's correct, which you can see here. And and the facade just wraps the building just a little bit. The way that it was refinished when it was moved to the museum, though, they did finish the entire side, so the whole building is one solid color. But when it was actually down on Elkhorn Avenue, for the most part, just the front facade and maybe the first quarter of the building was painted that white color.
It was obviously built between 1909 and 1915 when it was occupied. And my guess is that it was originally built as a store because of those big windows in front. They look like store windows.
Yeah.
They're not office windows. They're for showing something inside. So
Yeah.
I think it was originally built as a store.
Yeah, the research that we've done, we've actually changed from calling it the National Park Headquarters Building, because in its 90+ year history, it was only the National Park Headquarters Building for a very short time. So we've actually gone back to calling it the Historic Boyd Building, for two reasons. One, Boyd is the one who originally built it, which his home was right here. And the building was almost attached to his house. Built it as a storefront to rent out. But we have to call it the Historic Boyd Building because now the entire building that sits on that lot is called the Boyd Building and the Boyd Block even, by the Weimar County Assessor. And so we call it the Historic Boyd Building now, so that's in a better context. All right.
Moving on.
Yeah, we'll keep on moving here. This was a photo that Mick really wanted to include for this presentation, and it's the view from of Estes Park from Park Hill, kind of what he was talking about. Driving in, it looks a little bit different today, of course.
Yes, it does. And this is a different photo than we used in our original book to include the now. You know, there were so many photos that we wanted to put in, but you know, we got two chances to put in various photos. And you know, in the early 1900s, this is what it looked like. And as you would drive in, and driving is a relative term, because you would come in with a cart and horses, not a car and air conditioning. This is the road that you would go down. This road is still visible in this area. This is private property. It's known as the Upper Crocker Ranch, and there's the now. And we would go right just past the fence line to try to match this up. But as you can see, it's very, very different. Now, way over to the left of the trees is where the original Highway 36 is at. But like I said earlier, and like Derek just reminded us, when you come into the park, this is some of the views that you would see. And it's right above what we know as the Crocker Ranch.
Notice how steep that road was. And some of the stories are that in the early stagecoach days, sometimes they would actually tie some branches as drags behind the stagecoach to keep it from going out of control going down that road. Because you can imagine how it'd be tough on horses. And then, of course, as a car road, think of trying to pass one another, or even two cars meeting, one coming up and one going down. That would be quite a feat as well.
Definitely. So next time you drop into town, make sure that you look off to the right for this little area here, and you can actually still see where the old road was. And this is another pretty iconic image of Estes Park, and it's taken originally from Mount Olympus here. And you're looking on the Big Thompson River.
And actually, if you look at the background behind my head, that's also taken from Mount Olympus.
And Mick went out and reshot this one.
So this I shot actually before I had even met Jim. You know, I had several of his books and I've read them, and I was trying to figure out what I could do to you know, to publish something on Estes Park. But when I saw this, and actually I saw the version that was published by Enos Mills, because he actually published this in one of his books too. We were trying to figure out, and Jim, I don't think we've ever figured out really who took the original shot, but it is published by both W.T. Park and Enos Mills, and we've seen it with a few other names.
Right.
So when I first started, and this was something I was starting to do on my own before I met Jim, like I said, I knew where it was taken at from the general area. So I went down into this area that's known as the Crocker Ranch, and I talked to the ranch keeper. He was Tom Adams. And I said, listen, I'd like to be doing a book. And I showed him the postcard, the original postcard. And I said, I know this was taken up there. And he says, oh yeah, it was taken from up there. Now, this is Mount Olympus, but it's not all the way up Mount Olympus. It's about halfway in an area called the Ship's Prow. And it's very, very predominant when you look to the east from the town. You see this lower level of outcropping that exists, and that's where it was taken. So Tom said, well, listen, I don't own the ranch. There's two ladies that own it. Let me see if I can get permission. And he was trying to manage my expectations. He said, you're probably not going to get up there. They don't like having visitors on their ranch. And I said, well, I understand that, but I appreciate you asking. I called back the next week and he said, boy, they said, yes, go ahead. So I was, I was in heaven, so to speak. And so I said, when can I come back? And he said, well, when do you want that? I said, how about tomorrow? He said, do it. So I came back the next day and I hiked up here to the Ship's Prow, halfway up Mount Olympus. And it took me over 30, 45 minutes to find the right place. And actually right near the end, I thought, I can't find this. It must have been taken from someplace else. That's a common story that I think we all said to ourselves in the process of making this book. And I turned around and guess what? There it was, like awesome. So I took the shot and somewheres in between the lower area of the ranch and up between the Ship's Prow is one of my own lens caps. Because when I came down, I was missing a lens cap. And I wasn't going to ask for permission to come back on and try to find my lens cap. And they're what, 12, 15 bucks. So that's the way it was.
One of the things that's interesting here, go back to the original photograph. This is probably 1903, 1905. Notice what is now or Mall Road coming around the corner down there. You can actually see that. And those must be the buildings of the Dunraven Ranch, a couple of them, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. And then wind your way up the Big Thompson River. And my guess is that may be Elkhorn Lodge, up, way up against the mountain, those small buildings there. Because I can't imagine what else they would be.
Yeah,
a little more over to your right. No, you're right.
Are they right?
Yeah, right. Those little, the three dots there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right in there.
Could be. Let's see. Yeah,
so what's interesting is that every time I look at these photographs anew, something else strikes me as interesting and important. So I guess that's why we have a book like this, because you can go back to it any number of times, look at those photographs and find something new and interesting every time. Well, this is the Estes Evans Dunraven Ranch as it existed in about 1905, 1906. What's interesting, this photograph was taken from what was the lower, the smaller arm of Lake Estes, which since the 2013 flood has simply been a kind of a beach volleyball court. This is looking back on the hillside, and you can see one of the original cabins up there for the Estes Evans Ranch. I should go back. This is where Joel Estes and his family originally settled. Remember, Joel discovered the place in 1859. By the early 1860s, he and his family were living here, raising cattle, giving advice to tourists. He moves out in 1866. In 1867, Griff Evans and his family moved in from Lyons. And really, it's under Evans's ownership that the place has expanded to become really Estes Park's first resort. And it was expanded on into the 20th century. This building here right in front of us is also visible in a number of the other early photographs that we have. The building behind it is considerably older, and that probably goes back to the Evans Estes time in the valley. And Mick took this, he waded out into the water. There is no water now. You can walk out to the site, but he was good enough to wade out. And I don't know who that is. Is that me up on the shore of the looking at you, or somebody's looking at you?
On the right side?
Yeah, on the right side.
Yeah, it was just a lady hiking through.
Where those rocks here on the left-hand side, I think that must have been a spring house. That's the spring house in the original photograph. Right in here on the left-hand side.
Yeah, we've gone back there several times, Jim, and you know, that's what we decided is that you know, that was the spring house, and at the time it was right on top of where the road was constructed. So the road, you know, the structure was removed. You know, the area was of course dredged and paved, and as you can see, those rocks a little bit further lower. Derek, if you can point to those rocks. That are, yeah, right there. They had to, at one time they capped it, and there's a natural spring involved as well as the drainage from the hills up above, and it kept eroding the road base. So they actually had to put a pipe underneath, and it drains out there.
This was a real find. One of the things we did before we even started taking photographs was taking the retaken photographs, the now photographs, was to get a good library of photographs, then photographs to work from. And one of the places we went was the archives over in Rocky Mountain National Park. And one day we went in there and Mick re-photographed virtually everything we could find. Well, what he found was there were 3 individual photographs that when he put them together later on, it turned out this was somebody's attempt in the 1930s, one of the early rangers, I believe, to create a panoramic photograph without having a panoramic camera or a panoramic lens for a more modern camera.
I have to add that you know, when we first saw these pictures, and Jim was combing through the albums trying to be selective as to what we should take and what we didn't. When I first saw that these 3 shots, I saw the one on the right-hand side first, and I thought, this I don't know what this is trying to say, what the shot is of. And these 3 shots were not connected in the folders where we saw them. And I'm just glad that I did I did shoot all of them, Jim, because when I got home and when I was sorting through the shots that I had, this is when I realized that, oh, that's what they were doing. They were trying to shoot a panorama.
Well, you did a great job of matching them up to the 3 older ones. That contour of the land follows very nicely right along.
Yeah, they used a wide angle lens, so there's what we call a spherical aberration on the sides. And I actually put them into Photoshop, and I sort of bent them into shape so they'd match up. But hey, those are the tricks of that we have nowadays.
And then this is not quite now, because this is actually from the 2006. We were going to compare it with what's in the Then and Now book, the revised edition, but we didn't get that uploaded quite in time for the program today. But you can still get the idea of the change there. And of course, we wanted to go out and reshoot stuff for the revised edition, because after the flood, as Jim was mentioning, this is all now backfilled in. This part of the lake is much, much smaller, and it's really resorted back to the original part of the creek there, coming down this way.
By the way, you see that old, what looks like a Model A car. I don't know if that's what it is. You could go to the Now. That's Jim's car.
That's my car.
We have all 3 of our cars, Jim's, myself, and our other partner, Carrie Stevenos. All 3 of our cars are in the books.
Well, this was one of my favorite photographs, not only because it's a great photograph. It was taken by a photographer named Frankie Baker, who had a studio over in Greeley. And for a number of years in the 1880s, he would come over here to Estes Park and take photographs. This is a wonderful photograph because it shows the Estes Park Hotel, Mr. Dunraven's hotel, as it was originally built. Later on, that balcony on the second floor was taken off and 2 wings were added on the side to add more accommodations, more rooms. But this was particularly fun because of those 3 rocks in the foreground. And I'm going to ask Mick to talk about that, about why the now photograph looks a little bit different from the then photographs. But trying to find these rocks was really fun, and we finally found them. And now you can go on to the now photograph, and Mick, you can talk about why it looks different, the distance between those rocks and the actual hotel site across Fish Creek Road.
Well, when Jim showed me the original Baker shot, I thought, well, how are we going to find this? So yeah, we kind of have an idea of where the Estes Park Hotel was at. And he says, oh, I think I know. So we parked up by the golf course and we walked down to this area. And I was like, oh yeah, those are the 3 rocks. Now, those 3 rocks are predominant and they were a signature. If you go back to the now shot, Derek, you will see that the area besides the rocks looks a little bit more different. In fact, at one time there was a pond, there was a lake that was constructed just behind these rocks and between these rocks and the hotel. And so the topography has changed quite a bit. Go back to the then, Derek. And you see there's no trees. Go back to the now, and all of a sudden trees sprung up. And so I was not satisfied with the shot, but I used to drive Jim and Carrie nuts trying to be too technical and too accurate on this. But I shot this and it was close enough that we decided to use it. But those 3 rocks are the signature, and it's what said, yep, this is the place. And if you go back further behind where the hotel used to be, there's still a remnant of a fireplace there. And you can see where the original hotel was at.
And today they're right below the 11th tee of the Estes Park golf course. So as you go down after teeing off and take off down the fairway, you look down to your right-hand side and you can see those rocks. There are even more trees now than there were back in 2006 when that photograph was taken.
And Jim, what year did the Estes Park Hotel burn down?
1911 in August. Yeah.
Thanks.
Are you testing me?
Yeah, I got to keep you on your toes.
Okay.
Somebody's got to.
Mick, you want to talk about this because this was one of the real adventure days in putting together that first edition. We wanted to take this because it's arguably the first photograph ever taken of the Estes Valley. And we knew it was taken from Mount Prospect. So talk about our day going up there. And we didn't go up the tramway, by the way. We walked all the way up. And I remember that Carrie was so angry with us because she said, well, we could have taken the tramway up and fed the chipmunks and then looked for the site.
Well, and Jim and I weren't sure. Carrie was insistent on the fact that we should take the tram up and then try to find this site. And as it turns out, she would have been correct. But we parked our cars. We went down by Mary's Lake and we drove around Little Prospect all the way where you can. And you go up that little road until you meet a gate. And that's where we stopped our car and we got out and we started walking up. So really what you do is you start circling around the south side of Little Prospect and you start to see the town and you start to see more things. It was a fairly warm day, folks. So that added to the frustration. So, but we were sure, we being Jim and I were sure that we were going to find this place and that we would miss it if we didn't walk up and around the road. Well, lo and behold, after about an hour and a half or two, we came to the tram station and still no sight. And Carrie was looking at us like, I told you guys, but she was good. She didn't say it. And so we kept walking and walking and walking. And it's about another 45 minutes to an hour till we got up to where we could look over on the west side of the Little Prospect and see the valley. Okay, well, by that time, we were trying to handle our emotions, especially Carrie, because she knew she was right. And like I said, we should have listened to her. But we could not find where this original shot was taken. So the day was getting long, and as you know, in Estes Park, sometimes around 1 or 2 or 3, the thunderstorms start rolling around when the weather's normal, by the way. This year's been an exception. And we thought, well, we better take it and get down. So we thought this is about the best we can do. And as you will see, Longs Peak and Meeker and the other hills that are there, they're pretty much in alignment. They're close by. And at this angle of view, you can pretty much make anything match. But what you don't have is that foreground, that outcropping of the rocks, that dead pine tree that William Henry Jackson shot here. And I've gone up there since, and I'm pretty sure I know where this was taken now. But I'm not going to be able to prove it or to be able to take the shot because this area is surrounded by a high link fence, and it's right where the cellular towers are at on top of Prospect Mountain. But as you can see, the view is still pretty. You can see Mary's Lake in my shot. You can't, in the other one, I don't think you can. No, you can't see the lake. Oh yeah, just a little bit.
But you got to keep in mind, Mary's Lake was a lot smaller originally as well. It's been expanded now.
Yes.
Here's a trivia question.
Just make it out.
Of all the photographs in the book, this is probably the only one that we can date with absolute certainty, not only the year it was taken, but the day it was taken. It was taken on May the 30th of 1874 because William Henry Jackson, who was part of a Hayden mapping and exploring expedition, kept a journal. And so we know the day he went up there and took a number of photographs, this being the most famous. And in those times, the whole front range was known as the Snowy Range. And you can see why it would be called the Snowy Range from this photograph.
Guys, we have a participant who's wondering if you had to get permission from the owner at the top of Prospect Mountain before you guys went up there.
Actually, I think it's owned by the town of Estes Park, and we didn't ask.
Okay.
We didn't ask. We usually were very good when we knew we were going on very private property to be sure we had permission of the owners. But if you get up to this particular site, what you discover is that virtually all the town's electronic equipment, cell towers, are up there. And so, no, we just walked up and walked around.
And I'll make a comment on that too with the now photo for this one. But Jim, if you want to give some of the background here for St. Walter's, that'd be great.
Well, it's the first Catholic church in the Estes Valley, and it was and still is up there on McGregor Avenue. In fact, you can see the road going out. This was taken in 1922. It's the earliest photograph that we have, though the church itself was built somewhat earlier. But you can see McGregor Avenue going out toward Mcgregor Ranch. And by this time, there were actually telephone poles. So we know that there was telephone service in that part of the Estes Valley. But it was built to service the needs of a very small Catholic congregation among the early residents of Estes Park. And Eric, you can talk about its modern transformation.
Yeah, and this was one of the first I think one of the first sites I really went to with you, Jim, to go ahead and capture, at least one of the new sites that we were going to go to. And you can see here that it is a private residence. In setting out for this, I wanted to be especially conscious and respectful for everybody, because being a town employee, I don't think I can traipse on anybody's property. Jim would say, just wave your badge and you can get us anywhere, but I don't think the museum carries that much clout. But we did drive up to this house. We got some looks from the people, and we jumped out, and we told them what project we were working on, and we showed them this historic image, and they said, oh, of course that's our place. And the way that we were received so well, and they were so excited about it. They invited us in. They wanted to show us around. They wanted to show us the house behind it, because that has a whole history going along with the St. Walter's Catholic Church. And that kind of set the bar of, I thought, well, anywhere we go, we will get welcomed like this. And I didn't want to be naive about it, but we truly were, once we would show people the project that we were working on. And it was nice to have that warm welcome, but it was even more interesting of how much history these people already knew just by living in these historic places, that they didn't even realize that they knew so much. So we ended up learning a lot from them.
And that's been converted into what, I think there are 4 apartments in there now.
Yeah, these are all apartments now, and I think it's all painted red now. It's right off of Mcgregor. This is all the photos you take end up becoming historic at some point in time too, because change is constant. But this is where the roundabout is now, on Wonderview Avenue. The most difficult part of this photo too, which also was good to set a precedence for me to realize what I was getting into with this project, was I got back as far as I could, but there literally is a fence built there at the property line. I was trying to get the angle right of Lumpy Ridge in the background on the roof line of the actual structure. I couldn't go back any further, and I actually had to climb up the fence, which is why I'm towering over this, what was a minivan in front of me, and hang onto the fence with one hand and take the photo with the other. So quite the experience.
Derek, talk about the parsonage, what we discovered in there.
So that's the building that ended up being right behind the original church. And that's where they would have, I guess any...
well, that's where the priest lived.
Yeah, it was where the priest lived, but it also kind of sounded like the owner was describing to us that he had always heard that they'd also do little retreats there for more priests. So it wasn't just the main priest for this exact church. But what was interesting was he invited us into that, and it's a private residence now, but up over the fireplace itself is a cross that is inset within the stonework of the fireplace. And so it's pretty neat to see it.
It was neat.
So you never know. You also can't plan that. So you think, oh, I got 20 minutes. I'll run out and capture a now photo real quick. And sometimes your sites are that quick, and sometimes they turn into almost like a picnic with the owner and tea time. It takes a while.
This is a wonderful photograph. I think I got this from the Hicks family. The Hickses, of course, went back to that particular vintage, which is about, this is probably 1905. Well, no, the town wasn't platted until 1905. So 1907, 1908, 1909. These are a number of little girls. We think maybe they were celebrating a birthday party. But they're standing on the far side of what's now Bond Park, looking down towards Elkhorn Avenue. And in addition to the young ladies, what caught our attention was the little white building on the upper left-hand side of the photograph, because that's the original William T. Park store. That's the store that Mr. Stanley stopped in to make his famous phone call back down to Lyons to indicate that he'd arrived safely in Estes Park in 1903 in his little steam car.
So this was one too that I was asking Jim. Like I said, I was pretty familiar with the 2006 edition, and one of the things that drives me crazy is how many early photographs we have of Estes Park that do not have any people in them. when we look at photo albums, they all do. But of course, some of the professional shots that were done back then, they went out of their way, just like you'd have to today, to get a photo without anybody in it because town's so busy. So I asked Jim, do you think we can maybe come up with some shots that have some people in them and then repose them or do whatever, but kind of bring it to life and humanize it a little more? And this was the photo that came to his mind immediately because, like he was saying, it was a photo that he's always been fond of. So he basically said, this is a photo that I'd like to do, but do you know anybody, that has a younger kid and maybe their friends that could come and pose for it? And fortunately, at that time, my daughter was a little younger. So I said, yeah, I definitely do. And so Jim said, why don't you go ahead and pull them all together and we can't see if we can't reshoot it and get the girls to stage it with some contemporary girls. So I had my daughter ask a few of her friends, and of course they were all interested in it. We decided on a date to meet down there. Everybody showed up. Jim was hoping to show up there and help out and show him some magic tricks and everything else. And then he got called into a meeting. So it was up to me to corral all these nice young ladies. And I think I kind of promised them some nice sugary snacks if they all listened to me well. But besides me telling the story, I'm going to invite my daughter, Leela, here to go ahead and tell the story because she got to participate in it.
Yeah.
So here's Leela right here.
So let's talk about that day and what you did.
Well, so, it was, what day was it in the week?
Oh, I don't even know.
I think it was just a school day, and I asked all my friends that morning. I was like, hey, my dad's shooting some photos for a book that the museum's doing. Do you want to be in them? And they were like, sure. So I got all my friends, and then two of my friends brought their older sisters, because in the back you can see there's some older girls. So they brought their sisters. But how many years ago was this even?
This was a few years ago.
It was a couple of years ago. We were in probably first grade.
Second grade, yeah.
Yeah, so we're all a little younger, but so.
Do I understand that you wanted to wear party dresses originally?
Yes,
We thought we didn't think.
Yeah, in order to get the girls on board, we showed them the historic photo, and they were all convinced for a little while that they should show up in historic dresses and big bows.
Yeah, we really wanted to dress up fancy, but.
And then we convinced them that we should just go ahead and take a nice one with some contemporary clothes.
Yeah. But my friend on the.
It'd be on their right.
Right.
Yeah,
her name's Amelia, and so she originally was next to me, but she was too close. She was too far on the left. So my dad kept saying, "Go to the right."
I kept saying, "Move to the left."
Yeah, she was too far on the right. No, yeah, right. So she wanted her to go to the left, but on her side, she was going to the left.
So every time I would say move to the left, so she would get closer to Leela, she moved to her left.
So she'd move to her left. So that's why she's so far out of the picture. It's because it's just really funny.
It's amazing how those girls have grown, including
it is.
In the 3 years since the photograph was taken.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a fun photo to capture. It was very hard to stage. Some of our scenic ones are much easier to do, but it was a lot of fun. And this was another fun one that I wanted to put in there. This was the high school football field where it was originally located. I guess it's easy. It's probably easiest just to explain it by jumping forward. It is now where the library parking lot is. So the town hall was originally the high school building. Had an auditorium, which was removed at some point in time, and then they put up the town board room and everything else there. So it's changed quite a bit. But right behind it would have been the football field itself. So you can see it here. And I wanted to reshoot this because we have so many people that have so many memories of growing up here, playing football here, going to the high school here. And I've heard so many good stories about it. And I loved this photograph that we had in our collection. And so it was one that I wanted to reshoot. But the interesting thing about it was the angle that it was taken at. It's up so high. And so when I went to reshoot it, I kept trying to think about how can I get up that high? So I went early one morning downtown and parked in the library parking lot, of course, and walked over across the street thinking about it. And luckily, somebody was outside of Brownfields just sweeping the sidewalk. And it was an employee of Brownfields. And again, you know, I told him, don't think I'm crazy, but we're working on this project and I got to get up higher. Is there any way I could get on the roof of Brownfields? And she said, that is a little bit crazy, but what's even crazier is we have a ladder right around the side that I could let you use to get up there. So we set up the ladder real quick. And as soon as I got onto the first rung, she said, from this point forward, we are no longer liable for anything to happen to you. So I said, that's fine with me. I'm committed to this project, and got up on top of Brownfields and kind of like hanging on the fence for the St. Walter's Catholic Church, hung on to the front facade of Brownfields sign there, and with one hand, and then snapped this photo with the other hand. And so, and again, I had to do it in the fall because of those trees. They're so, even here they have a lot of leaves on them. They block some of the view. But if I would have done it in the middle of the summer, all you would have seen were the leaves and not even any of the cliffside, which would have been very hard to match up.
This football field must have been unique because on one hand, you've got Elkhorn Avenue.
Yeah.
And then beyond the other goalpost, which you can see down there, you got Black Canyon Creek.
Yeah.
So there were two real obstacles to play around.
And in order to fit the entire football field in there, they had to shorten the end zones themselves. So one of the cool things we have in our collection is some home footage of a football game being played down here. And you can see somebody running their hardest to get to the end zone on the far side there towards Black Canyon Creek. And as soon as they get into the end zone and get the touchdown, they have to slam on the brakes so that they don't go into the creek. So it's very interesting seeing that footage. And then the other thing that we were able to include in the revised version too were some inset photos. And we wanted to include this one of the football team itself. I get a lot of questions from people who are looking up on the cliffside there, and they can see a nice blacked out part on the rock that's been painted several times. And it's actually apparent in this photograph here what that was. And this is from the 1959 yearbook for the high school football team. And what I've subsequently learned is that some of the football teams would go up there and they would spray paint on that spot their class year so that it was just hanging in the background. The first time I had ever heard that was actually from a gentleman that graduated sometime in the early 60s. And what was interesting was I started looking through multiple yearbooks and I could find it as 59, 60, 62, all these different numbers. So it's hard to, when you look at it now, you always try to identify it as one specific year, but they actually did it multiple times. So it's a fun thing to include.
Let me add one thing, something that I could have said too when Jim asked me about the Miller Panoramic. You've heard already, you know, Derek and myself say things about things we had to do to retake the shot, including wade out into the middle of the lake, but although that lake wasn't there before. But these folks back then did not have DSLRs that you could just hang around your neck.
Yeah.
They had huge tripods. They were medium format cameras. So, you know, I described the hike across to the star to get the 1919 Miller. Imagine doing that with about a 50 to 70 pound tripod and camera equipment. And, you know, where Derek's had to go to reshoot some of these as well. Hats off to these people. They really wanted to take these pictures bad.
Yeah. And it's interesting how much you can learn about a photographer just by trying to stand where they originally would have stood. I always tell people you don't even have to know that much about them as an individual or that much about the photograph you're trying to reshoot or even the time frame for it so much. you learn so much about it. And then once you start comparing your photo to theirs, that's when you really start picking out some of the details to see not only how many things have changed, but it's also very interesting just to see how many similarities there are.
Well, this is Mcgregor Ranch, and this is a really interesting photograph because I don't think any of those buildings still survive. What I wanted to be able to indicate was that the building in the middle of the photograph was the current ranch house, but I don't think it is. In fact, I'm not even sure where that photograph was actually taken from, except it's obviously across the road. There are fields under cultivation, so you can get a sense of Mcgregor really was a productive and working ranch, not only raising cattle, which they did, but raising various kinds of crop, including hay for the cattle. But that building confounds me to this very day. Go back to the now photograph, because there seems to be a sloping hill to the left-hand side, does there not?
Yeah.
And there seems to be a building behind that. Derek, is that the current ranch house?
I don't think so. This is a tough one. And I'm not sure who reshot this, if it was you, Mick, or if it was Carrie originally.
I'm not sure either.
That was me.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
And
You recall any of the details? And one thing too that I do have to say, because we got a series of Mcgregor Ranch photos here. Mcgregor Ranch was very photogenic then, and it still is today. So the then ones are awesome, but some of your now ones are just as gorgeous. It's just such a great location.
I've been working on the ranch because the first superintendent of the Parks House was right behind the ranch, and to get permission to run a road right up through that pasture, which would be right smack in the middle of this photograph. The superintendent lived there until the 1950s when the building was taken out. But the superintendent, which was a fellow named Louis Claude Way, he had to negotiate an agreement with Donald Mcgregor to get a right-of-way to get past the Mcgregor Ranch and into the area which in 1917 was added to the national park. So he was on park property, but he had to go through Mcgregor Ranch to reach his home.
Interesting. Well, we also have this one.
I love this one, and this was the original book jacket for This Blue Hollow. I'm not sure that I chose it. I think the University of Colorado press people chose it because it was one of the photographs in the book. But this was obviously doing something that Enos Mills said never should be done. Yet he had a sign up at Long's Peak Inn that said, "What do you want with an armful of flowers anyway?" Well, I guess the lady in the front could answer that question. And that's how it looks today. That's obviously a more modern barn. That probably is a 20th century addition to the ranch. This is, what was this called? The Japanese tree? Is that what it's called?
That's how I've seen it identified, yeah, in postcards and things like that.
I guess it is because of just a general look. But this was on the hillside, just above what is now Devil's Gulch Road.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the original Mcgregor Avenue winding its way out from town to the side of the ranch. And that's the view, of course, today.
And I'll add that you know, we did this, of course, in the first edition as well, and none of us really knew where it was at. And at the time, we had met up with Barbara Gish, who was Clatworthy's daughter, and we showed her this picture. And she said, "Oh yeah, I know where that's at." And she kept saying, she said, "Keep going, keep going, keep going." We thought she doesn't remember where it's at, you know. And she was an older lady at that time, and we thought she just didn't remember. Well, guess what? She did know, and we wouldn't have found this without Barbara Gish's help.
Derek, you can talk about this one.
Sure.
This is a Peter Hondius photograph.
It is. This is one that I've always really liked. So Peter Hondius Jr. has been involved with the museum for quite a long time now, and he's donated a lot of his family photographs to our collection. So his father was Peter Hondius Sr., who homesteaded in Upper Beaver Meadows and ended up marrying his mother, who was Eleanor Estes James, and now Eleanor Estes Hondius, or became her, I suppose, and then and is involved with Elkhorn Lodge. And so you have a lot of history going on there, and it all comes down to Peter Jr. And Peter has been so gracious in donating so many photographs, and people are always surprised because the largest photograph collection we have of any lodge or hotel in Estes Park is not the Stanley Hotel, like most assume. It is actually of Elkhorn Lodge, and a lot of that is due to Peter being so gracious and donating those to us. But he's also donated a lot of his family photo albums. And this one was always a neat one because he told me a little story that goes along with it. But we're looking at Horseshoe Park, but this is back when Peter Hondius Sr. owned Horseshoe Park. He's actually in this photograph. I forget which horse he is on, but they were all marked, so we do know which one it is. But what's even more interesting is we have Eleanor Hondius, who is sitting here on this horse. And the story goes that Eleanor had always wanted her own head of cattle. And so her husband, Peter, for her birthday one year, decided to surprise her with her own head of cattle. And he let her, it was completely registered under her name. He got her own brand, which was a different variation of his brand at the time. And they went ahead and set up their little, her head of cattle in Horseshoe Park. And so this is a great photo of that, of that whole operation that she had going on there. It looks like a lot of work to me, but she really wanted it. And so what's neat about it is I've always wanted to know, where was this in Horseshoe Park? So this was a fun one to go out and reshoot. And I had to reshoot it a few times because it's kind of weird, but the angle itself I could not get right. So this is right in Horseshoe Park, right off of the road. There's kind of a pull-off area. And this is right when you are going up to Horseshoe Park from the Fall River entrance, and just after you crest the hill, there's a pull-off to the right, and it's very close to that. The first time I went out to reshoot it, though, I thought the angle was much higher. And when I tried to match those photos up and overlay them, I could not get the middle ground correct at all. So I went back and reshot it and was able to get a good angle. But what I've always loved about the original then photograph is they had another one to go with it. And this one's interesting because you have Peter Hondius Sr. here actually branding one of the cows, which you can tell is moving very fast because it's a blur. And then you have, it would be this would be Peter Hondius Sr.'s brother-in-law, Eleanor's brother, Howard James right here, who ran Elkhorn Lodge. And so I thought it was neat that you got one of the then photos outside looking at the corral, and then this one actually in the corral. So I thought once I had figured out where the corral was, I could go ahead and actually really pin it down, and I was able to actually capture what it would have looked like from inside the corral now as well.
Go back to the original photograph.
Sure.
Yeah. I'd always thought that the earliest road into Horseshoe Park was in the middle of the park, that had been right behind that fence somewhere. But it looks to me like this is clearly a road not very different in position from where the current road is. So this,
It's been interesting. We've actually been looking into roads and looking at some older maps because we're also trying to figure out and verify what exactly the road would have looked like for the original hydro plant for FO Stanley, since we operate that in the summertime. And we've been researching that with one of our docents, and we've been finding kind of some variations on the road. Sometimes the road looks like it's on the other side of Horseshoe Park. Other times it looks like it's running right past. Even at that time, before it was the park, it says that it's going past Hondius Ranch, which can be confusing because most people that look at that will think that it's Upper Beaver Meadows, but it's obviously after they've set up this cattle ranch and they're calling it Hondius Ranch. So I don't know. It's interesting. I'd like to look at more photos, but I think even in this one here, you can even see where the road is there. And then even on the then photo, you can see at least the fencing back there. I'm not quite sure if there's a road back there as well.
well, there was a road back there to get to the, who had the Ashton property. And if you look at Bill Butler's book, he talks about a road going from that side of Horseshoe Park back to the Ashton property in Little Horseshoe Park.
Okay.
That may be the road you're talking about. Now, when we retook the 1934 entrance station, which was in Horseshoe Park, that would appear to show a road coming through the middle of the park and not over here to the right-hand side as it exists today. So, you know, there are all kinds of interesting puzzles still to be resolved.
Yeah, I find like every time we find out a new piece,
It opens up more questions, yeah.
it does, but it's still fun.
It is fun. This is one of my favorite photographs. This goes back to 1889, as the caption indicates. And that's the year that William Allen White and his fraternity brothers came out to Moraine Park and spent the summer out there in a cabin by the Big Thompson River. And when William Allen White wrote his autobiography, published his autobiography in '54, he talks about that first summer. And he says something to the effect, if I ever became a man, it was in the summer of 1889, living with a dozen boys in a cabin beside the Big Thompson River. In other words, he was imputing that it was a marvelously male bonding experience that summer. Well, what my sister and I discovered when we did the little book on William Allen White and his Moraine Park years was that it wasn't an all-male excursion. A number of co-eds from the University of Kansas, properly chaperoned, were in a cabin not too far from the boys' cabin along the Big Thompson River, where they became men in the summer of 1889. And they would take excursions together. There are photographs taken together of William Allen White, who said he detested hiking, but back in 1889, when he had a girlfriend, he made it up to the top of Long's Peak. And this is a rock that exists down, it's just off the, what's now the Bear Lake Road. The story is that one day, Fred Funston, who was one of the young men, he became a major general in the Spanish-American War, but he spotted some sign painters painting a sign on a rock. The sign said, "Drink Denver soda." He took his gun and chased the sign painters away, but not before they had actually done their work with lead paint on that rock. Well, here are the boys and the girls posing on that rock some days later. And then we go to the current rock, the now photograph. You can barely see in the side of the rock the sign, "Drink Denver soda." So this is one of the fun photographs. And since we've labeled it Funston's Rock in the book, I think this is the only landmark in the entire anthology, the entire book, where we have actually named a landmark in Estes Park or in Rocky Mountain National Park. So Funston's Rock, it should be Funston's Rock. We've labeled it, and Funston's Rock, it will remain.
We need to go back there with people and reshoot that.
What's that?
I think we need to go back there with people and reshoot that and put a lady right on top.
That'd be good, especially if we can get somebody with the right decor to kind of cover the top there. And it's funny because it actually gives it scale too. So in reshooting some of these, you know this, Mick, but it's hard because if you don't have people in them, sometimes you don't think you're in the right spot. The rock doesn't look good enough or something like that. And so it always is helpful, but that would be a fun one to reshoot with some people.
I think, by the way, that's William Allen White on the left-hand side.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
A comment popped up, Derek, says Scott volunteered his daughter now that she's older.
I've looked at that rock, and those girls are very brave. Those footholds out there are not all that big. And this is another favorite one. This is the homestead cabin, Abner Sprague's homestead cabin. The original one had a peat roof on it, so this is probably the second stage, taken about 1880. But this is where it all began, Sprague's Ranch and then Stead's Hotel. And over here on the left-hand side, what looks to be a shack is actually a spring house covering the spring, which still flows down the hillside. And it was that spring that attracted the Sprague family to homestead that land back in the 1870s. Not only did Abner homestead this piece of property, but his mother, father, sister, and brother also homesteaded in the area, to the point where at one point the Spragues had about 960 acres covering most of Moraine Park. So this cabin obviously doesn't exist anymore, but it's a wonderful historic photograph of the way it was back in the 1880s. And this is the way it looks today. We're looking back toward to Cub Canyon.
You can see how well the background really matches up there.
Yeah, it's a good job.
This is always a spot too when people are interested in history and they want to go exploring somewhere. This is a place that I often recommend to them. Not during the elk rock by any means. Stay clear of it then, but it's a great spot to go down, and especially if you have any of the historic images, because you can find some of these spots so easily because there are so many prominent rocks down there. But what I'm always amazed with is how many springs are down there. It is so wet down there. You got to really watch where you're going.
And this is after 1904, when this was the original lodge building. Before the lodge, there were a number of cabins and a small dining room area. This was significantly larger. This was built when Abner Sprague and James Stead became partners for a few years, and their first project was to build this central lodge building. And you can still find some of the footings of that building down there. The Park Service took out all the buildings and most of the substructures, but there's a concrete slab down there which marks part of that hotel building.
And this is the photo that Mick took. I do have to say this tree in the middle has now fallen over.
Yeah.
But I do like how you have somebody sitting over here to match up the original.
That's Carrie, because that was Fred Clatworthy. This is a Clatworthy photograph. That was Fred Clatworthy's wife, I believe, or sister.
Very neat.
We decided we needed to pose Carrie in that photograph. And this is one of my favorites as well. Again, a posed photograph, because you can find that rock. And when I take people out there, there's the cabin we just saw, the homestead cabin with the spring house to the right of it. But I take people out there and I will pose somebody on that rock, and then I will show them that they're sitting in this very same place the tourists were sitting in the 1890s. So just like finding mountains allows you to find sites, so finding big rocks like the one on the left is very helpful in relocating scenes.
And again, that's that big tree there that is now fallen over. This is actually Sprague and his family, correct? So that's Abner right there.
That
It's Alberta.
Okay, and I see. I guess I didn't realize that. I thought these were just tourists.
Well, I'm not sure who everybody else is, but
Probably some of them are tourists. But yeah, that looks like Abner in Alberta, right? And this is one of my favorite photographs. And when I take people out on walks and tours, we always try to go out. These are the convict cabins. They were built in 1913 at the beginning of the construction of Fall River Road, the first road up and over the Continental Divide to Middle Park. It was started with convict labor in 1913, but finished by the state of Colorado in 1920. It took 7 years to do that project. And during that first summer and into that winter, the convict laborers from the Cannon City Penitentiary actually stayed in these cabins. They didn't know what they were getting into because the winter of 1913 turned out to be one of the most severe winters in terms of snow that we've ever had in this part of Colorado. The snow was general, but it was dumped here in Estes Park, and it was 4 to 5 feet deep. And you can imagine those poor men living in these cabins during that cold winter. There's very few remains of those cabins left. And that's why I like to take people out there, because in another 10 years or so, there'll be no signs. And this was interesting. This is something that Derek discovered. Why don't you talk about this, Derek?
well, I have to properly credit it. It was my wife.
It was your wife that found it. Okay.
I just happened to be there with her. So as you can see with the photo in the middle, the cabins were over there on the right of the road from how we're looking at it. And we ended up going off to the left for some reason, right where those aspens start. And then this photo on this smaller inset photo on the right, you can see there's a fairly large footing for a concrete structure. And I mean, it's very, it's like probably 8 or 10 inches of concrete per wall. That's how thick it is anyways. And then they're still pretty good size there. So we ended up, next time we went out there, or Jim and I were in the area, we drove out there. And so I said, hey, have you ever seen the concrete on the other side? Any idea what that was? So we went ahead and pulled over and started checking it out and got some photos of it. And then we really think that that's probably the spot where they would be keeping their explosives for the time, based off of just how it was constructed and because of the size of it. It was obviously just for storage itself, but I don't think there's too many reasons why you'd be using that much concrete to store some of your tools unless they were explosives.
I think you're right, and can you imagine, since they were living in these wooden cabins all the way around that? I mean, that's a lightning strike on that sucker could have sent them all careening.
Yeah, and so it'd be kind of right over in this area.
It's right there. You can see it right there in the. Yep.
Guys, if I can interrupt, we have a question asking the exact location of Sprague's Lodge.
Oh. Trying to think this is probably the best photo for it. This is Sprague's is when you're going back, you're on Bear Lake Road, and then you turn off right where you could either go left to the Discovery Center or right back to the Moraine Park campground. And the campground would actually be back here off to the right. And then the road that wise off of that, you can kind of see it here going off to the left. That's the road that goes back to Fern Lake Trailhead and the pool trailhead and everything else. And it's right in that section.
So look for those rocks in the middle.
Yeah.
And you will see right in this area on the just beyond to the right of the middle, you'll see a very visible trail going up through that property. And just take that trail. Then you'll find the rock where people were posed. And about 75 yards beyond that is the spring. And that spring is still running down the hillside. And that's fun to see.
And there's actually a horse trail that comes along here too. So it's a very accessible area. And look for this grove of trees out there, because it's in Moraine Park. And after these trees, it really opens up into just the meadow area.
And since Stead's Ranch lasted into the 1950s, you'll see manhole covers for the sewerage system. So it's you'll know you're there.
Yeah.
There's also macadam. The road was hard surface with a macadam surface, and you can find pieces of that as well as pieces of pipe, which are part of the sewer system for all the cabins in the Stead's Ranch. It was a large place.
Yeah, it was a large enough operation. They actually had a 9-hole golf course out there.
And a swimming pool.
And to go back to your convict cabin site, we've got some folks that jumped in and said one of the buildings was a powder bunker, and then part of the building was where explosives were stored. Can you guys talk about that at all, or?
What, Jess? What's the question?
I guess just confirming if that part of the building is a powder bunker.
Yes.
Okay.
No, not the building. It's over here. It's on the ground, right there. Yeah, right there.
Okay. Neat. Thank you.
And the only visible part of the cabin that's left is that second cabin in the then photograph.
This one?
Yeah. Yes. Now, but if you wander up that hillside,
it's right here.
You'll see where the other cabins were, because there are some rotted logs in there, but they built them down into the ground, obviously to keep them, that would provide some warmth so that the big cabins themselves wouldn't have to be built as high. So that whole hillside's got 4 or 5 of those cabin sites, which are fairly easy to find.
So Mick and Jim, we have about 5 minutes here, especially with everybody giving us an hour and a half of their time. Were there any specific spots that you wanted to make sure that we got, or you want to just keep going and see how far we get?
That's fine with me.
We're definitely nearing the end. I think everybody always enjoys Fall River Road. So
yeah, this is Fall River Road, and why don't you go up to that switchback and talk about taking that photograph right there.
This one was a fun one to do too. Jim and I took the day, and I feel like we spent half of it going up here because there's so many photos of every switchback, and so we tried to match up the majority of them and then see which ones turned out, and we ended up with 2 really good ones. This one's a little bit lower, as you can see here. And the thing that I love about this one is if you look at the rocks on the left right here from the car, they have been cut into. And also the car is going the other way because Old Fall River Road was 2 ways when it was the only way over the pass there. But the one that we ended up liking even more was this one, which is a bit higher up, so you can really see down into the canyon itself. And the road is so similar to exactly what it looked like originally. This one was so funny because Jim parked down in the switchback itself and told me to go ahead and walk up the road till I could find the spot for this. Everybody looked at me like I was crazy, especially as I would inch towards the edge there. But what was really wild is when I got back to the museum and I started matching this photo up to the original one, you can see this this trunk here that's obviously been dead for quite a while. It's actually in this photo as well. I couldn't get any further out because of the way that the wall is constructed. or my fear of heights got to me. But the road has been widened as well. When you're walking this road itself and you have these historic images with you, you can see that some of the rocks here that are on the left, they'd be on your right as you're driving up, they have actually been cut back a little bit more than what they originally were. So it's
that
pretty
dead
nice.
body would stay in that place and not fall down or be 60, 70 years later. That's amazing match.
It is, and you can actually see this is the part of where they have built the walls where they've kind of screened in the rock itself. And so there's been some work there as well, but it's just fascinating that that trunk is still there. This would be at the top once you have reached your summit.
And remember that before Trail Ridge Road was built, the road went straight across the parking lot, straight across the road, and went off towards Poudre Lake and the Continental Divide in that direction. So it wasn't until the 30s when they rerouted the road to create Trail Ridge Road that you approach the Poudre Lakes the way we do today.
And then we also did get one of the original station that was up there.
1922, yes.
And this one, again, we did ask for some permission because of all the places in the park that you are not supposed to wander from the trail, we all know as locals, is Alpine Tundra. This is right behind the visitor center itself. We did not have to walk, but probably 3 steps onto it, but we did flag down a ranger. They actually approached us because when we went around to even look where we should retake this photograph, apparently they thought we looked like we were going to just walk right out onto the Alpine Tundra. I got a little nervous, but when we turned around, the ranger and Jim knew each other, so that helped us out some. And they said, you know, that we could go ahead and do that if we wanted to, and we were able to get the photo.
This is a great photograph too. Notice the boat, notice the rocks.
Yeah.
Show them what it looks like today, and then Derek, you can talk about retaking this photograph.
Yeah, and we might go ahead and end on this one. But this was an interesting one, and again, hopefully Mick can kind of explain the depth of field here is just way off. But when you look at this little outcropping here and the rocks and the trees, and of course what the background looks like, we did find the right spot. This is down at Grand Lake, and you can drive back to a little picnic spot. I was hoping it was out there, and it wasn't. It was back in one of the neighborhoods. And so we went into that. What the good thing about the picnic spot is there's actually an aerial map there that talks about where you can go, where you can't go, and kind of giving a layout of the lake as well. And from that, we saw where there was a little inlet towards this neighborhood that's right next to the picnic ground. So based off of that, we went ahead and drove into that neighborhood. We went to the house where we thought that inlet would be right behind it. We went to the house, nobody was home. We went to the neighbor, nobody was home. We had a photo with us, and so we decided to wander back there a little bit, and there was a little dock that had been built back there. And unlike Mick having to get into Lake Estes, I didn't have to because this dock was built for me. And so I was able to walk out on the dock and capture the photograph, which the original one would have been in the water itself. You probably would have been on a little canoe again. But the depth of field, I was so excited to get the picture. And when we got back to compare the two, they're just way off. Even though we know we're in the right spot because of the rocks and the little outlet and everything else. But the depth of field for my camera and the original one used are not the same, obviously. So I don't know if you have any final comments on some of the technical aspects of that, Nick.
Well, and I wasn't there, so like
Yeah.
you said, there's something behind you. Obviously, all the right elements are there: the rock, the mountain in the middle, and everything. But if you notice on the then photo, that mountain's a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And so what that indicates is that even though you had the rock there, a larger telephoto lens was used than what you were using, but you were limited to where the dock was at. So it looks to me like, you know, if you could have gone back another 100 yards and zoomed in a little bit more, you would have gotten that same amplification on the mountain in the background and still had the rock in the picture as well. And that would have done it.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I think that was basically it anyways. We had Grand Lake Lodge. I just wanted to put it in there as a little nod to, you know, the recent fires and how important not just these historic photos are, but even our contemporary photographs of how these places have changed. It's definitely important to have. What's that?
Rumors about the fire was that it had destroyed Grand Lake Lodge, and then we discovered that that was not accurate, which is good.
Yeah. So again, I want to thank everybody. Definitely want to thank you, Mick, for being here, and Jim for being here. It's always a treat to present with you guys. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It was a great project. I want to thank all the audience members for hanging out with us for your afternoon. More than happy to answer any questions. And if we don't get to it, please, there's my email. I'm more than happy to, even if it's a question for Mick or Jim, shoot it my way. I'll be more than happy to facilitate any of those since we might not get to them. And then also, if you do have any questions about getting the revised edition of the Then and Now book, please reach out to Elaine or myself too. I can help facilitate that. I like I said, I do want to respect everybody's time, so we're more than happy to take any questions if you have them. But if you also have to go on with your Friday afternoon, thanks again for joining with us. Are there some questions, Jessica?
Not right now. There's no current questions. We did have one of our board members is in attendance, and they wanted to reiterate that delivery of the book is free in the Estes Park area.
Okay.
So if you do choose to purchase that, you have that option as well.
Definitely a good point.
It's always fun presenting with you guys too, Derek and Jim.
You know, we do have a good time, and you know, the experience of doing a book like this gives you a lot of things to talk about, as well as simply the contents of the book.
Yeah.
We do have a question, if you guys have a second.
Yeah.
Was there ever a lodge in Horseshoe Park?
What was the question?
Was there ever a lodge in Horseshoe Park?
Derek?
Yeah, there was. There's a Horseshoe Inn that was built kind of on the far side of Horseshoe Park. It's another one that's, you know, fairly accessible to go and explore. Right now they have a bunch of construction equipment parked there, but if you go around the corner and past the turnoff for Endo Valley and over the bridge, and then on the left there's a pull-off spot right before you go up the hill. And the park actually has an interpretive panel there that talks about if you look right across the road, that's where Horseshoe Inn would have been or was. And it's a neat little area to explore. You can definitely, you think you're looking at a pile of rocks from the road, and if you actually get to walk back there, again, not during the elk rut because they're all over that place, but it's a pile of concrete, and it was the original foundation for Horseshoe Inn.
And you also had Fall River Lodge.
Yeah, Fall River Lodge was built a little bit further back, and it's another neat one to explore. It's back past the when you're going into Endo Valley and past the Long Lake trailhead. So it's a little pull off to your left. And really right off of that parking lot was the lodge. The neat thing about both of those lodges is they had some man-made lakes put in around those lodges that they pulled right off of the Fall River. And those basins you can kind of still see if you're looking in the right spot. And we captured some of them in the book. And because of the rich soil of those man-made ponds, after a while, now they're just full of trees that are in the exact shape of those ponds. So it's pretty interesting once you know what you're looking at.
And at the entrance of Horseshoe Park was Cascade Lodge. It burned in the 1930s. Cascade Cottages, which the Conservancy raised money for to give to the park, are still there, but the original lodge burned about 1934.
Yeah. Yeah, anything else? Okay. Well, thank you again, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy holidays to everybody, and stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you for another program down the road.
Definitely. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.